1 year in office for the Modi government, what, to your mind, are the positive developments and the achievements clocked in by this government?
We have to view this in the context of what was inherited a year ago. At that time, there were a number of issues which had made all of us and the economy very despondent about the future. One area was corruption. Now, in this last year, we have had no instance of a single scam. We have had a system of allocating natural resources like coal and the spectrum for the cell phones done by a transparent auction system. The process has worked well, and there are no issues there. So I think one of the things which has happened is that one area of major concern for corruption and crony capitalism has disappeared. The coal parts was another major issue because the energy sector was grossly handicapped by absence of enough coal production. And the recent auctions which have taken place, the coal mining had been stopped by, the allocations had been stopped by the Supreme Court, I think also shows that that bottleneck has also been overcome. On the environment front, a lot of projects had been held up or delayed inordinately because of the process involved in clearing from the environmental angles. I think those have been dealt with, and a lot of old stuck projects have been cleared, and the progress on infrastructure projects is much better than what it was
right.
thought.
Right. But Mr. Bhargava, do you think the government initiatives, such as Make in India, augur well for the auto industry and players like you with such an export focus?
The auto industry is one industry where Make in India has been a reality for quite some time. It's not something which is going to start making in India. It has been making in India. It's been making in India very successfully. In fact, the auto industry really shows that Make in India is a very possible action which can be taken, it can be successful. What is required is that some of the extra costs which are associated with doing business in India, whether it's related to infrastructure, compliances, tax, ways the tax thing works, the appeals against tax things and such things, if those are reduced and it becomes easier to do business, I think our competitiveness of Make in India will further increase, and the auto industry would therefore become an even more competitive product for the rest of the world and grow further in exports.
Do you think the government stand on GST, land acquisition, etc., will aid the industry, and these are the much needed reforms, especially for an auto company like you, Mr. Bhargava?
The GST is something which everybody, including all the political parties, have really agreed that GST is required to reduce costs of doing business in India, to make India really a common market where there are no artificial barriers and boundaries, where the logistics of moving goods is not made unduly costly because of different hold-ups of the transportation system, different levies everywhere. So I don't see that on the GST there is any difference on the principle of having GST. Everybody agrees it's required for the country. It'll add to our GDP. Land bill is a more political matter now, and the reason industry is keen on the land bill is that land acquisition has traditionally taken far too long to happen in India. And that has been one of the major causes of delays of establishing industry, which adds to the cost of industry and makes us uncompetitive. It has been a major cause of delaying infrastructure projects, which again adversely affects industry. So industry is very clear that we need a land law which will enable land to be made available for infrastructure, for industries, available quickly. The fair price of land is not an issue. I don't think industry minds paying the fair price for land, but we do mind inordinate delays in acquiring land. And I think the land bill is trying to address that issue. And I hope what finally emerges from Parliament does not compromise on the factors which lead to a speedier acquisition of land.
Now, coming to the consumer sentiment, do you think the pickup is there, and is the on-ground activity really translating into real demand?
You know, after almost 3 years of stagnation and decline, in fact, the auto industry showed small growth last year. Maruti, of course, had a much bigger growth than the rest of industry. And this year also has started well. So there is certainly some signs that things are improving. Whether this improvement in April will translate into a sustained improvement for the rest of the year is not yet certain. It's too early, too premature to make a judgment on that. But yes, the early green shoots are visible. Whether they'll grow to a healthy plant or not, I can't say at this stage. I might add that, you know, the disappointment which people express today in some areas is perhaps because their expectations were unduly high, unrealistically high, and perhaps they don't fully appreciate the fact that turning around an economy which had become actually quite sick over the last many years into a healthy economy is not something which can happen overnight or in a year or 2 years, even as far as I'm concerned. And also for that to happen, I think it's not only the government or the central government which has to do things. A lot of things have to be done by the state governments, but an equally important role has to be played by the people at large, including industrialists. They also have a major role to play in this, and everybody has to realize that without their getting into it, whether it's the cleanliness business, whether it's discipline, whether it's following the laws and the regulations, in all of those areas, I think we as citizens have a role to play.
Okay, and finally, before we wrap up the discussion, Mr. Bhargava, in terms of risks to the auto story or to the India story at large, do you think weak monsoon, higher oil prices could spoil the party and maybe lower purchasing power of consumers due to higher inflation?
Inflation so far has not gone up. The last figure we saw was still a minus 2 point some percent. Yes. But it's true that prices of petrol have gone up, oil prices have gone up, and we are not sure now, despite this falling inflation, whether the Reserve Bank will continue to cut rates or not. We are hoping that rates will be cut. So I don't think that the consumer so far is in any real distress, because the increase in these prices of petrol are, I think, about 1/3 of the reduction which had taken place.
Okay, Mr. Bhargava, we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for joining in and giving us that perspective.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.